Tips with Toni. Tips with Toni. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Toni. Tips with Toni. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Toni. Woo.
Hello and welcome to the Tips with Toni podcast. I'm Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I'm really excited for you to hear this next interview. Her name is Michele Payn, and she is a public speaker and author of 3 different books, and I'm holding one right now that I purchased at a nutrition conference that she was at, and it's called Food Bullying: How to Avoid Buying BS as in bull speak, and she talks about what that actually is. A lot of people today feel shameful of their food choices, aren't quite sure what to buy, and she basically helps you and gives you permission to buy food based on your health, ethical, environmental, and social standards rather than on brand, friend, or social media claims. It is really a great book to purchase, and we'll talk more about it in this episode. But if you don't do anything other than listen to this episode, I still think you're going to learn a lot. We talk about GMOs, hormones, antibiotics, what is in your food, what isn't in your food, what's healthy, what's not healthy. It's a really great episode, so make sure you listen to the end. All right, guys, without further ado, here's the interview with Michele Payn. Enjoy. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm super excited to have you on the podcast. I'm really we're going to talk all about nutrition and food and how it's grown and how our food has grown. And I'm super excited because this is something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, but almost didn't feel, and I know I'm jumping right now, but in your book, you talk about how I don't live on a farm. So as much as I'm being taught and told all this stuff about how our food is grown, I'm so disconnected from it that even as a nutrition professional, I sometimes get caught up in oh my gosh, am I giving out reliable information?
Sure.
So I'm super excited to have you because I know you live on a farm. You're a professional speaker and author, and you have been in the field of nutrition and agriculture for 19 years, I think you said, before we hopped on. So I'm really excited to have you kind of talk more about what you do, why you do it, and a little bit more about your story. So if you could just jump right in, I'd be happy to hear about it.
Well, hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here with Toni as well. So thank you for having me. And basically, I am originally a farm girl from southern Michigan. I have beautiful black and white cattle right out there in my front yard. Matter of fact, they're bellowing right now, so I'm hoping you can't hear them because I think I'm sick or something. I'm a mom. I love fitness. I have a cross-country basketball playing daughter, and I am married to a city slicker, as I like to call him. So most of the stuff that happens around the farm is driven by females here. Wow. And I'm a stepmom of 2, and I love international work, and I've written 3 books, and I don't know what else you want me to say. I'm not real great at talking about myself. I'm better at talking about food and farming and all that good stuff.
No, I love it. Well, what got you into, you grew up on a farm? Or you live on a farm?
I grew up on a farm. I went to Michigan State University and earned 2 degrees there. And while I was there, I worked in the reproductive physiology laboratory in the animal science building. All the stories I could tell. But during one of my final years there, I saw a radical animal rights organization try to burn down our animal science building that I worked in.
Wow.
Leaves an impression. And those of us that are on a farm take what we do with not only deep pride, and it's not only a business, but it's a way of life. So when you see radical people attacking that, it makes you question. And then a few years later, after I was out in California and had started my career, I saw another anti-agriculture group try to blow up our agriculture hall at Michigan State is my alma mater. And so that, that kind of propelled me forward into really wondering. And I got into all of this because a little bit later in my career, I worked for the National FFA Foundation, which is an agriculture education organization. And I had the opportunity to explain what agriculture education was to a lot of really interesting companies, some in agriculture, some in food, some in nutrition, some in banking. Mm-hmm. And as I managed relationships in 15 states, I kept seeing that there was this misinformation out there about agriculture, that people didn't understand where their food comes from. And it really disturbed me because for the 1.5% of the population that's on a farm or ranch, it's really important to us. And if you eat, it's probably important to you too. So that's the long story. How I got started almost 19 years ago, which is really hard to believe. So I work in not only training farmers, but also working with dietetic groups and really try to connect farm and food and everyone around those worlds, which isn't contentious at all.
No, definitely not. You have a hard job. You have a hard job because there are a lot of extremes and people with really like deep-rooted beliefs. And basically it sounds like what you're saying is you're kind of politely telling them that what they're believing might not necessarily be true. And it's a hard pill to swallow, right?
Well, it is. And I wrote Food Bullying because I truly believe that there's so much manipulation of our minds that's going on around food. And I'm a mom. I get it. You know, I want to eat healthy too. I want to look great. I want to feel great. I want to be here long-term for my family. And more importantly, I want my kids to be able to be healthy. Mm-hmm. Those are deeply entrenched values. And unfortunately, I think that a lot of people have been misled by the bullspeak or the BS, as I say in the book, that's out there because there is so much misinformation. And I just really try to get people to know the science, the source, or the system. For example, as a dietitian, you're trained in the science, right? Yeah. And you're supposed to be making evidence-based recommendations. Sure. So that immediately pulls together farmers and dietitians because we're very interested in science. Mm-hmm. For those people who yawn when they think of science or chemistry or those sorts of things, I would suggest that you take a look at knowing the source, which are the families that are out there producing your food. 96% of farms in the United States are still actually family owned. Mm-hmm. So knowing that source is really important, getting that firsthand expertise, or you can know the system, which is knowing the system that's in place to protect your food, FDA, USDA, EPA, Food Safety Information Service, those types of entities.
Right, exactly. Well, so I guess let's talk a little bit more about your book because I'm halfway through it. I love it. It's so good. If you guys have not purchased it already, it's called Food Bullying. And by the end, you're going to want to purchase it. I'm sure you can explain more about like where people can find it and all of that. But it is really, really informative. And I think the best part about it is really showing the two sides. And I think what happens is people, they want to eat healthy, right? They want to start buying more fruits and vegetables and they want to start, eating more like quote unquote, and then we'll kind of deep into it, but like healthier meat that's been like grass fed or with a grass fed finish or whatever it is. And they get to the grocery store and now their shopping cart and their food bill is like 2 times or 3 times the amount. And now eating healthy is too expensive. And now they go off and they're just like, no, I can't do this. And then they go the complete opposite direction. So if you could, I would love to just start like quickly by kind of going over some certain like food labels that are out there that people might be purchasing and spending more money than they actually need to be. Because if they really looked at the science or how the food was produced, it might not make that much of a difference. So sure. What labels do you think that are out there that are being kind of used to be misleading intentionally?
Yeah, and I think it's important to also note, in addition to the cost, people are getting stressed out about food.
Yeah.
And it's sad because it's negatively affecting health. When you're stressed out about making the right eating choice, you can't possibly shop with a clear head. Right. And so I think it's really important to just get back to the essentials of, is this food nourishing and is it safe?
Yeah.
And those are the 2 things. But as far as some of the labels, one of my least favorite labels, and I'm sure you'll agree with this as a dietitian, is clean.
Oh, yeah. What does that mean? Did you wash it with soap?
Exactly. I'm like, so did you wash it? Is the rest of the food dirty? Folks, don't pay for silly labels. Don't pay for the bull speak labels because it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so when I look at some of the BS claims, it's things like ethically raised or farm raised. So at the risk of being a little facetious here, I would ask, how is it that your food is raised on a farm and mine's not? Because all food originates typically on a farm unless it comes from a tree. And even then, those folks usually farm. So that's one. I also think that the local claim tends towards BS. I love local food. My family goes and picks blueberries locally. We enjoy getting apples locally. But the reality is I like bananas. And bananas are good for us, right?
Yeah.
And for my runner girl, they're kind of a necessity.
Yeah.
I live in rural Indiana. There is no local banana here whatsoever.
Right.
So while local is really important, and I understand people's interest in supporting that, and that's great, just keep in mind that it's not always the right answer because there is no right answer for all of us. And I would also mention Local Boar's Dilemma is a great read if you're really into the local food movement because it actually walks through the carbon footprint of what sometimes that local food cost us environmentally. So that was a long one. Detox. What's your opinion of detoxing food?
Oh gosh, don't even. I can't because if you eat healthy food, it's naturally going to support your body's regulations of detoxifying the body, and there's nothing that will detoxify. It might make you go to the bathroom.
Right, but that, I'm not going to get it. You as a dietitian, I look at cow manure. I don't talk about people poop, but but in the second section of the book, I talk about fairy tales and some of the folklore that's around food and the free labels, which I would put detoxing in. So antibiotic-free, hormone-free, non-GMO, they're free from science often. And the best answer in all of that is absolutely science. And here's why. There's only one food that I know of that is free from hormones. One. So your kale, your syrup, peanut butter, milk, steak, tofu, almonds, it all has hormones in it. Mm-hmm. Salt does not. Mm-hmm. That's the one. So the hormone-free thing is a ridiculous claim. Antibiotic-free is one. And we didn't talk about this beforehand, but a lot of people are concerned about antibiotics in food. I get it. Antibiotic resistance is a concern across the country. The numbers are in food bullying, but a very small percentage of antibiotics that are used in animals can be used in humans. A very small percentage. But more importantly, for example, milk. I don't know how many times you've heard that there's antibiotic in milk.
Yes.
Is that something you hear a lot of?
And that and the hormones, more people are concerned with the hormones in the milk.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because when you look at both hormones, antibiotics, there's a lot of misnomers. So antibiotics is an easier one to explain. For example, we just had a cow have a calf 2 days ago. Mm-hmm. And if you follow me on Instagram, Peppy was born and she's adorable. And so her mom just started giving milk. And like all women who breastfeed, there's this whole hormonal evolution. It's a natural process. She's not given any additional hormones, and most cows in the United States are not. Same with Canada, same with Europe. And then what happens if she gets mastitis, which is an infection of the mammary gland, is she will be given antibiotics, and here's why. If any of your listeners have ever had mastitis before, if they've been a breastfeeding mom, you know that there's inflammation, there's edema, there's fever. It's very uncomfortable. So if you can imagine this cow that has, let's say, anywhere from 40 to 70 pounds of udder hanging between her legs, and it's inflamed, it's an animal welfare act to give her antibiotics. That milk never goes into the bulk tank, which is the big storage area.
Right.
And so it's tested before it would ever go in. If she does get mastitis, which most cows do not, but it's tested before it goes in from the cow. And then once it's at in the bulk tank before it leaves the farm, it's tested. Once it gets on the trucker to go to the processing plant, it's tested. And then it's tested multiple times at the processing plant before it ever goes into a gallon jug, half gallon, whatever it may be.
Yeah, right.
So regardless of whether your milk says antibiotic free, regardless of whether it's organic, regardless of whether it's in a purple polka dotted container that costs you $8, it doesn't have antibiotics in it because it's not legal to do so. So that's a very long drawn out. Sorry, I get off.
No, that was what people need. That's what people need to hear. And that's exactly it. It's true. I want to talk about this. I know we're going to talk about like GMOs and stuff. And sometimes it's like a lot of times people are so supportive and let's just say like animal rights, right? And they want you to treat the animals fairly.
Yes.
Letting an animal, it's like if you had a child who got strep throat, like I'm all for, and this is like, once again, I don't want to like talk, and I'm not a mom and I don't know, but I know personally, like I don't love taking antibiotics if it's not necessary. But if I have something like strep throat, I'm taking antibiotics because I know that the repercussions of not are a lot worse versus then it might be a sinus infection. So maybe let's give you an antibiotic where I think maybe I just have a cold and let me wait it out. That's my personal opinion. I know like that kind of went off the tangent a little bit, but I think basically what you're saying is it'd be inhumane to not treat this animal. And like you said, and even though it's getting treated, it's going, by the time it actually does produce milk, it's out of the cow system. Yes. So I think that was really, really helpful. So I really do appreciate that. And because you talked about hormones, I would love to say, I think a lot of people see, like, I know chicken breast are like a lot, you can get like really, really large chicken breasts, and then you can get like small chicken breasts, right? So the belief is that to get the animal's chicken breast that large, that it's been pumped with hormones. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, so Dolly Parton chicken breasts are not from hormones, they're from your demand.
Yes, thank you.
And so here's the deal, folks. Genetics are amazing. Absolutely incredibly amazing. As a person who has been breeding animals for decades now, it is fascinating the things you can do and the things you cannot do. Because consumer demand historically in the United States of America has been so incredibly high for large chicken breasts, they have larger breasts. No hormones are allowed. It's illegal to put hormones in chickens. Mm-hmm. You can't pump them full of anything. They are not large breasts because they've been injected. It is because they have been bred, because that's what people want. And it's actually really interesting because, not to get too much into the whole food science arena, but the waste from chickens because of our fixation with white meat has actually been a challenge because people want breasts. They don't necessarily want the others. So no hormones used, I promise. It's actually a fascinating opportunity to look at how genes really are one of the coolest ingredients on your plate.
Very cool. So what you're basically saying is like, so I was not blessed with large breasts.
Hello, neither am I.
So, however, my sister was. So basically, like, my sister would have to be with a man whose mother had large breasts, and then the likelihood of their child having large breasts would be higher. And so what you're basically saying is that there's no hormones being pumped into these chickens. They're intentionally, is that what they're doing? They're like raising chickens to like have larger breasts because they're choosing chickens that only have large breasts?
Yeah, so basically, and I've never bred a chicken, to be clear, never in my life, but I've bred a lot of dairy cattle. So I can talk about it from a cattle standpoint because the same theory applies. And by the way, genomics and reproduction in bovines and in animals, the research that's been done is so much further ahead of humans. For example, if you're a benefit of IVF or any of the reproductive technologies that allowed you to have a kid, it was done in cows.
Wow.
I mean, it's really cool technology. So, for example, genetically in cattle, I'm looking out there because that's where our heifers are. And so we have one family that has beautiful udders, and I'm not trying to get personal. We really do talk about them. So they have beautiful mammary glands. And then we have another family that doesn't. So when we select bulls, and the cattle are all artificially inseminated for safety reasons and for efficiency reasons, when we select the semen, when we select the bulls, we select bulls that have good udders. So genetically, what they're doing is selecting the genetic lines that allow the larger breasted chickens. That's the parallel. Because we can actually select for, within the dairy population and beef population and other animal populations, we can select for conformation, which is what we're talking about, or protein values as an example in milk, or muscle mass in cattle. It's a breeding. The science of breeding that happens on farms is amazing.
Yeah. It's because so you're exactly right. You're selecting because I mean, and this is a whole other topic, but you as a farmer, you want to make money. And so the consumer is saying, I want white meat, I want chicken breast, or I want a certain type of like a cut of a cow or something like that. So you're going to produce what that person wants. And if you don't, then you can lose your farm. And that's something that you grew up on and you love. And it's really, really important to you. Because I know you also mentioned in the book, and I don't know if this is kind of a deep dive, but I think it is important that a lot of farmers are struggling with mental illness and depression and committing suicide because they're finding that they can't keep up with the large demands that our society has. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think what I said is that one of the victims of food bullying and the far-reaching consequences, one of those is the mental health crisis. And that does not mean that farmers have mental illness, to be clear. Right. But we do have a crisis where we have farmers taking their life by suicide at nearly twice the rate of the general population. Wow. It's really hard to explain to people outside of farming the depth of care and love that you have for caring for land or animals, for being a farmer. And it's not just a lifestyle, because it is a business. Clearly, farmers deserve to make money. And this year, in 2019, we have had horrible weather across the country. For example, in Indiana, a lot of our crops didn't get planted. It was the first time in my lifetime I can ever remember crops not being planted. So that's impossible to make money in that situation. We have flooding, we have blizzards, we have all sorts of challenges. And then we have the trade wars. And then we have chronically low prices. So for example, in the dairy business, which we seem to be talking about nonstop today, prices have been at an all-time low for the last 5 years. Dairy farmers are actually producing milk and losing money. They work 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and they've been losing money, operating in the red. So when you consider all of those factors, and then you add on the constant questioning and the challenges that a lot of people are throwing against farmers, that we're not doing it the right way, it adds up to some pretty tough mental health challenges, frankly. Yeah. Farmers are very independent, a little bit stubborn, actually a lot stubborn typically, because you have to be successful. And we're taught that you just take care of things. You take care of everything else. You don't worry about yourself. None of that necessarily adds up well for having conversation with consumers or in taking care of your mental health. Mm-hmm. So it is a tough time for anybody in agriculture right now, and there are a lot of farmers that really need to do a better job of taking care of themselves. Wow,
yeah, it's a lot. It's not, like you said, it's not just one reason why they're struggling. It's a bit multifactorial for sure.
Yeah, and so if you don't have a farmer in your life, I can fully understand that. But when you connect with one, whether it's virtually or in person, just offer some words of encouragement. Mm-hmm. Let them know you appreciate what they're doing. They really need to hear that encouragement right now. And I can attest that those words have a lot of impact.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you for everything that you do. I'm really, really excited for more people to read more about your book and to learn more about this, because I think it's really important. One thing you did mention was right now, sometimes you can't always plant the crops. Sometimes the weather doesn't allow it. Things happen. And so here we are where there's certain foods that are using GMOs, genetically modified, to produce so that we can have some foods just in case something like a drought would happen. And I know a lot of people don't really like the fact that our food is being temporized, if you will, or being played with or something. So can you talk a little bit more about GMOs and like what foods in fact are genetically modified and kind of the stuff that happens in the grocery store when going to shop for, say, for example, strawberries that say non-GMO on it and what that does to the consumer?
Sure. So I understand the concern about the genetic modification, and I would encourage you to look at it from an engineering standpoint, because the precision that happens with bioengineering is absolutely amazing. And it's probably a more accurate term than genetic modification, because, genetic modification brings up all these pictures of a syringe and a tomato and things being manipulated and so forth. And so the best way that I can explain it is if you look at an iPhone, and mine's filthy and embarrassingly dirty. I don't have an 11 yet. What is this? I forget what it is. But in any case, what I do is I ask people, okay, so if I take Insta off of this and I put on Twitter, is it still an iPhone?
Yes.
And so how is a corn plant not a corn plant if I turn off one gene and put on another that allows that corn plant to be naturally resistant to a rootworm that will kill it? It's the same exact concept. And for people who think that we're manipulating food, I would challenge you to look at genetic expression in your family. You had mentioned your sister's bra size versus your own. I can't even believe we're talking about this. That's a perfect example of how genes kind of go crazy. They do what they want to do because they're genes, right? And so I think it's important to understand genetics overall. Your food does have DNA in it. I've seen studies that actually show the majority of people think that their food should be labeled if it has DNA in it.
Oh, wow.
It all does. Anybody who's listening out there, DNA isn't bad. DNA is good. We like DNA. It's genetic expression. So without getting too down into the depths of it, bioengineering allows the very precise turning on and turning off of genes. So that may sound scary, but for example, we throw away 40% of food in this country. 40%. 1 in 5 people are hungry. We have hundreds of thousands of children that are hungry. I'm not okay with food waste when we have hungry people. And then environmentally, I'm not okay with it either. So I think it's an interesting sustainability opportunity when you consider the fact that we have the Arctic apple that does not brown, because who wants to eat brown apples? What kid wants to have those brown apple slices? But it hasn't been accepted because of groupthink that's been pushed on companies like McDonald's and so forth, that these Arctic apples are bad. Likewise, there's other technologies that can solve blindness. And yes, there is technology that allows a plant to not be killed by a weed killer. And I will tell you, and I don't have time to get into all the science right now, that is actually has some environmental opportunities for farmers as well as consumers because of what it allows farmers to do. But I think more importantly, when you go to the grocery store, this is what I want you to know. There's a dozen, 12 foods that have been genetically modified. 12. Strawberries is not one of them. So you pick up that beautiful package of strawberries, which, by the way, is probably imported from another country, especially this time of year. The last thing I would be worried about is the non-GMO label. I love butterflies. I have a tendency to put butterflies back when they're on my food packages. Because just for your information, that butterfly, the non-GMO label, is a money-making opportunity. It costs a lot of money to get those products certified as non-GMO. Here's what I would look for. And I covered in the Food Bullying book is the bioengineered label. I'm looking down because I have the page here because I want to be sure I get it right. So it's going to be BE, which is clearly very unsexy. But by 2022, it is going to be required in the United States. Interestingly enough, Canada last year did away with the labels about GMO that were on foods that had no GMO options on them. And so the United States is actually a little behind in this, in my opinion. So this BE label will be required to be on any food by 2022, and you'll probably start seeing it in the next year, I would guess. And it basically shows anything that has been bioengineered. So, for example, papayas. And I covered this in my second book, Food Truths from Farm to Table. Papayas had to be bioengineered or genetically modified to save the crop in Hawaii several years ago because of the fact that the trees were all being killed. I believe it was by a fungus. They were all being killed, and the cucumber gene actually played a role in saving the papaya plant. It's a really cool story.
Very cool.
Yeah, so there's great stories out there like that. So here's the deal. Whether you believe in GMOs or not, and that is totally up to you, number one, make sure you understand what bioengineering truly is. And number two, know that there are a very limited number of foods that actually have been engineered, genetically engineered, bioengineered, and don't let the butterfly fool you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay. So just to recap, just to clarify and button that up, because it was so great and I don't want people to miss that.
And it was really long. Sorry.
No, it's great. This is so great. So there are only 12 foods that are genetically modified. And I believe like cotton is one of them. Like you wouldn't even eat that, right? I believe that, right? So if you are someone who chooses to eat non-GMO foods, don't fall for something like a strawberry that's has never been genetically modified and says non-GMO, which is the butterfly that Michelle is referring to, is a label that people pay money for to put on their package just so that you buy it, and then they upcharge it. So a strawberry that has the GMO label, that doesn't have the GMO label, the nutrition is the same. Also, something like a papaya that might be genetically modified, the nutrition is still the same. So
exactly.
So the nutrition quality is the same. If it's more of like a belief system and you don't like the idea that, once again, the food's being tamperized, that's a different story. But really what we're saying is that by quote unquote manipulating, not injecting with a needle, but taking specific genes and helping them to express so that they're resistant to dying, you're actually decreasing food waste and allowing there to be more options out there, sounds like, right?
Yes, and this is the way that I look at it, is I suggest that people know their health, ethical, environmental, and social standards.
Right.
And the reason why I bring that up now is because I realized when I wrote out my own standards as examples in the book that the reason why I believe so adamantly in GMOs is because I believe that we have a responsibility to provide nutrition for people around the world.
Right.
Excuse me. And I know 40% of our country doesn't believe that, but that is something that I absolutely believe in. And I also believe in choice. And this is the perspective that I would offer. You have a choice whether you want to buy something with the non-GMO label on it. People who farm also deserve the choice of, if it's the right choice for their family to plant GMO seed, they deserve that choice equally as much as you deserve the choice. So that's just kind of a perspective that I encourage people to keep in mind. Science clearly shows that there's no long-term effects. Science clearly shows that there are no nutritional differences. And it costs, just so you know, I think about $150 million to bring a bioengineered product to market.
Wow.
Yeah.
One thing that just crossed my mind that I don't think we spoke about, but I think it'd be important too, is the term organic, with organic fruits and vegetables. I would love for you to talk a little bit more, because I think a lot of people don't like the idea that pesticides are being sprayed on their food. So they buy organic because they believe that the organic fruits and vegetables then won't have pesticides on them. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So the USDA organic seal is actually one of the meaningful and measurable labels that I cover in Food Bullying. And I was trying to find which page it's on because I don't have that memorized. But basically the organic seal, if it's the USDA organic seal, is managed by the marketing service there. So it is a measured, definable seal. Here's what it does not mean. It does not mean your food doesn't have chemicals in it. Because first off, you have chemicals in it, and yourself. We all do. We're comprised of chemicals. Chemicals are a part of life. They're reality. We just got to get over and move on. Secondly, if you've ever grown a rose on your balcony, or if you have, tomatoes, you know that where plants grow, bugs go. Mm-hmm. Those bugs can be insects. They can be molds. They can be weeds. They can be a variety of things. I know any number of organic growers or organic farmers who will verify that they do use chemicals. The difference is that there are different class of chemicals and that they are monitored very closely to be more, quote, naturally based. So the challenge is to help people understand that organic farming is a production choice, not a nutritional claim. For example, one of the farmers that I actually feature in the book is a friend, Ryan, who's out in Nebraska. He farms about 5,000 acres, which sounds huge, right? Mm. He's a family farmer, not an uncommon size out in the plains. And he is actually taking about half of his acres from conventional farming to organic farming. He's doing so as an economic choice for his family. Mm. And so it's interesting to see what people believe to be true about organic versus not organic. Personally, I can't afford it. And I happen to believe that the choice should exist for people who want that option, but that does not mean that people should feel guilty if they can't afford it.
Yeah, I really like that you said that. So thank you very much. And I do want to point out that in your book, you do a really, really good job of all you're trying to do is educate the consumer, and you're not trying to tell someone it's right or wrong, right? We just identified it's okay if you choose to eat GMOs, food, genetically modified foods, and it's okay if you don't. It's okay if you choose to eat organic, it's okay if you don't. The problem becomes with the food bullying is people are made to feel less than or shameful or stressed out no matter what choice they make. And I think at the end of the day, it's really more about making an educated choice and decision that you feel good about, that you value, and that will help kind of justify your choices and you'll feel more confident about it.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And I think that it's important to note that food should be about celebration. Food should not be about condemnation. We should be enjoying food as a source of nourishment. Food is food. At the end of the day, we eat it for nourishment. And we just have to get back to the question, is this food safe? Is this food nutritious? If you can say yes to those two things without any label claims attached, then more power to you. Right. But when I see studies that show that underprivileged consumers, those that are on fixed income, low income households, aren't eating produce, they're not eating their fruits and veggies because they've heard things like the dirty dozen list, and they feel guilty because they don't want to buy, quote, the wrong food. There's no wrong food. And there's no perfect way of farming. And that's, I think, the juxtaposition that we're at is you have to understand if you're doing the right thing for your family, that's enough. You don't have to do it the same way as everyone else.
I love that so much. Thank you so much. Honestly, I would love to keep chatting with you. I know that you're on a time constraint. I might probably have you back because you have 3 books and I've only read half of one of them. So, so far I'm like, I really, really love it. So let's, is there anything you want to add before I kind of ask you to tell people where they can find the books? Is there any kind of last minute throw-ins?
No, I would just encourage you to understand that there's a $5.75 trillion food business out there that's manipulating you. Mm-hmm. Food bullying has both the psychology and neuroscience of how that's happening. There's some really cool research that I tried really hard to explain it so that it was digestible to people, but food doesn't have to be so complicated.
Totally.
Just get the right nutrition in yourself or your family and quit feeling guilty about it.
100%. Thank you so, so much. So now please tell people where they can find you and where they can get the food bullying book and then your other books as well.
Sure. You can find me at causematters.com, and my social handle, and I'm on pretty much all of the channels, is at Payn Speaker. So it's MPAYNSPEAKER. I always love to hear from readers. If you want to tag me when you're reading the book, I enjoy seeing that as well. And then my 3 books are available at causematters.com, as well as Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Books A Million, Chapters Indigo, and Powell's. A couple of them are available at Walmart. The 3 titles are Food Bullying, Food Truths from Farm to Table, and No More Food Fights. And I always love connecting with people in the food, nutrition, and fitness space. So seriously, please reach out to me. It's been a true joy.
Yes, thank you so much once again, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Bye. If you love that episode, please don't forget to screenshot it, share it on your story, tag me, tag Michelle, contact us, let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, what do you want to know more about. If you're not already subscribed to the Tips with Toni podcast, subscribe. A new episode comes out every Monday and every Wednesday, and when you're subscribed, you will not miss a beat. As always, thank you so much for listening. I'm Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.